What's up, guys? This is Jan for Chess24. It's high time to do another game analysis video, and this one I'm going to look at the game between Vladimir Kramnik, the former world champion, and Rainer Buhmann, very strong German player, played in the Dortmund, I think it's called Sparkassen Cup 2016, third round. Kramnik is a bit of the king of Dortmund, won this event, I'm not sure, 10 times? Many times. The man who dethroned Kasparov in 2000 feels very much at home in Dortmund. And he's facing Rainer Buhmann, one of the strongest German players, aged, I'm not sure, a bit younger than me, around 35, has been steadily improving over the last couple of years and gets his chance here to prove himself against the world's very best. Vladimir Kramnik with the white pieces, slightly surprisingly, goes for one e4, but we've seen him do that in recent tournaments. He's expanded his repertoire quite a bit. Not only going for d4, but a lot of knight f3, g3, a lot of d4, bishop f4, and recently also rediscovered his love for the e-pawn. Buhmann goes for what I believe is his main line, the French, e4, e6, d4, d5. Kramnik goes for the main move, knight c3, knight to f6, and e5. There's the alternative bishop g5 here, which has fallen a bit out of fashion recently. I believe mainly because black has such a wide choice. Bishop e7, bishop b4, d takes e4 are all fully fledged main lines that are very playable, so e5 limits the playing field a little bit and is therefore favored by most of the top players. Knight fd7, f4, c5, knight f3, all well known. The old main lines here all start with knight to c6, bishop e3, and now black chooses between a6, queen b6, cd4, followed by queen b6, or bishop e7, but recently there's a bit of a trend to delay this move knight to c6 and start with bishop e7. One idea is that with the knight on b8 you can sometimes go b6, bishop a6. Another idea is after bishop e3 they like to start with the move b6 even, stopping white from going d takes c5 because of b takes c5. And this line, has been gaining popularity at best. White approach still remains to be seen, so let's see what Kramnik has in store against it. He goes queen d2, preparing long castles and just an overall useful move. Black goes short castles, he's still waiting with bishop a6. Ideally you want to wait for this bishop to make a move before you go bishop a6, so that white has to lose a tempo if he wants to exchange it. Therefore bishop e2, therefore short castles. Now it's white to move, once again a choice. The trendy move recently has been the move knight to d1. This was recommended by Negi in his book and has been played by Anish Giri against Hari Krishna in the recent tournament in Norway. White intends to follow up with c3, stabilize the center, and play a bit of a slower game, in most cases castling kingside. However, Hari Krishna got a very good position in that game. He played a5, c3, a4, then followed up with bishop a6, and didn't experience particular problems, won a nice game here against Anish Giri, so not a surprise that Kramnik deviates and he goes for a much sharper approach. He plays the move h4, clearly indicating there's no kingside castles coming up. h4 has the idea of pushing this h-pawn further up the board to create weaknesses around the black king, but there's also another idea which we will see in the game. Buhmann goes for knight c6 now that white is committed to h4. It makes sense to play in the center. Once again, bishop a6 without the gain of a tempo might be a little too slow, and after something like takes followed by h5, I would guess that white has good prospects here. Therefore knight c6, nothing new under the sun. This position has still been played, but normally white followed up with h5 here, but Kramnik has another idea in store. He goes bishop to b5, attacking this knight immediately, leaving black with a choice. The only game I could find where this occurred in practice, black played the quite logical knight takes d4, c takes d, bishop takes d4, now knight c5. You could also go a6, when I guess white plays bishop d3, with a typical French position, but the type of position that black normally tries to avoid by going for this b6 setup. You don't want these structures with c takes d4 or d takes c5, and therefore not a big surprise that Buhmann decides to play differently. He plays a move queen to c7. You could also cover the knight with bishop b7, but this bishop on b7, first of all, it's a little passive. You can no longer exchange it via a6. Secondly, it loses sight of the e6 pawn, which could become a factor should black ever try to play f6 or f5. It's useful to have this bishop on c8 covering e6. So Buhmann plays a logical move, queen c7, Practice will tell us if this is too slow or if this is the way to go. And Kramnik shows that he has no intentions of slowing down, goes for long castles. Still keeping the h-pawn on h4, not in a hurry to play h5. Buhmann once again plays a logical move, the move a6, asking this bishop to show his intentions. There are alternatives, c takes d4 or knight takes d4, leading to a similar position to the one we just saw. c4 is often a move in these structures, preparing a6, b5. But here it's probably a little too slow because white can strike immediately with f5, organizing an attack before black gets there. So a6, quite logical. This bishop doesn't really want to exchange itself on c6 because here white gave up his good bishop, gave black the two bishops, and looks fairly comfortable for black. Therefore, Kramnik has to decide where to retreat the bishop. Bishop e2 looks logical, but also a little passive. Black would probably play something like b5 with a decent position. And bishop d3 in these structures is considered to be normally an inaccuracy because it provokes c4, and if this bishop is to retreat b5, the black attack rolls very, very quickly before knight b6, and the white king can end up in trouble very soon. Still, Kramnik played bishop d3, so that means he must have had an idea against c4, and this idea is bishop takes h7, sacrificing the bishop. And here we see another point of this move, h4, and why he kept the pawn on h4 for so long, because after king h7, knight g5, black would be ill-advised to capture this knight, since after hg5 this rook enters the game with pretty decent effect. So the logical move would be king g8, but now it turns out that white has time to just play queen e2, preparing queen h5 and queen h7 checkmate, and there's very little black can do because his pieces are a little uncoordinated at the moment. f6 always runs into knight takes e6, so after the most stubborn g6, white can just continue playing quietly, go queen g4, preparing h5, threatening knight e6, and there is no defense against the white mating attack. And I'm sure Buhmann realized that after Kramnik played bishop d3 very quickly, that he ran into the former world champion's home preparation, and he has to find a way to defend because bishop h7 might very well be a threat already. There's a couple options here. One move that comes to mind is f6, covering this g5 square and opening the center or threatening things like cd4, followed by fe5. But it turns out that there was more unpleasantness in store. After f6, it looks like white can play the move knight to g5, sacrificing this knight, f takes g5, and sacrificing another piece with bishop h7. Black has to accept this second sacrifice as well, king f7, f5. He is not gonna survive. Therefore, king h7, hg5. Once again, we see this rook entering the game, king g8. And white once again can play it quote-unquote slow, play g6, intending queen e2, queen h5, or g4, queen h2. And it turns out that black does not really have a defense. Feel free to try. I could not find anything here. So not a pleasant situation for Buhmann, who's facing this surprise and has to navigate a lot of very nasty traps. Another move could be c takes d4, but after knight takes d4, we get the structure that black has been trying to avoid and that white is clearly comfortable playing. So Buhmann didn't go for that. You also don't want to play h6, leaving a target in your armor here after g4, intending g5. Things look pretty pleasant for white as well. Therefore, Buhmann, in my opinion, took the best practical decision, went for the move f5, stopping this bishop takes h7, and also not falling for f6, knight g5, trying to block the position. White has to continue playing fast, because if he doesn't, black will go c4, b5, start his own attack. E takes f6 is not the way to do it after knight f6. Black's pieces become very active, knight g4 is a threat, so you can't do that. Therefore, Kramnik only has one logical move, and he played that. He played the move g2 to g4. F takes g4 does not really come into consideration after knight g5. The white attack just crushes through. Absolutely nothing to do here. We've seen lines similar to this one, bishop g5, bishop h7 wins already, hg5 is also winning. So you can't take on g4, you also can't reinforce your structure here with g6, which once again weakens your king here, h5, and white will just checkmate. So you have to do something direct, and Buhmann decides to go for the move c4 now. Quite logical. If this bishop were to retreat, let's say bishop e2, then black would gain a bit of a breather to start his counterplay with b5. Even though this position is still very unclear, I'm not surprised that Kramnik decided against this, or the more sophisticated version of it. this stuff with bishop f1 when you have bishop h3 in some lines. Kramnik wants to go for something more direct. And there's two options. He could sacrifice his bishop with bishop f5, e5 and knight takes d5. Queen goes somewhere, let's say b7. Queen d8 is similar. White goes gf5, rook f5. And here, a move like rook g1. White has 2 pawns for the sacrificed piece, but he has a very serious initiative. He does have plans like removing this knight and pushing his d-pawn. There's also trouble looming on the g-file. So this does not win directly by any means, but it would give White a very, very dangerous attacking position. Kramnik decides for another way to sacrifice a bishop that is also very tempting. He goes for g takes f5, just chipping away at the black pawn construction at the cost of a piece. C takes d3 is forced, f takes e6. Buhmann decides to keep the piece, might as well. He plays knight db8. You could give the piece back here, knight takes e5, but then after, let's say, knight takes e5, bishop e6, cd3, there's alternatives. White at least emerges a pawn up with a pleasant position. I'm not sure how big his advantage is, but White would certainly have won the opening battle. So Buhmann says, show me the money, I will try to weather the storm. And he goes for knight db8, the only square this knight has available, where it doesn't have to give up his life. Knight takes d5, of course the idea, the black center has completely disappeared. Queen d8, you could make a case for queen b7 as well, but queen d8 is more logical, targeting this knight on d5, asking it to declare its intentions immediately, and the knight does so when knight takes e7. Knight f6 is cute, but black could even take it with the bishop, so you don't really achieve anything with that. So knight takes e7, knight takes e7. Now let's take stock. White collected a bunch of pawns, I can't count, 3 or something, and destroyed the black center. But if black gets a bit of a breather, manages to get his pieces out, bishop takes e6, knight c6, queen d5, black can very easily be better here. So White does not have time to take his foot off the gas. He has to continue playing very actively. Kramnik does that. He goes for the only good move in this position, the move knight to g5. Covering e6 and preparing to threaten checkmate on h7 via queen takes d3, or after d takes c2, queen takes c2. Black does not have the time to do something like this. The white initiative is just too strong here. g6, h5, or let's say knight f5. And many good moves, but for example d5, the center, is just overwhelming. Therefore, Buhmann once again plays the only good and logical move, the move h6, asking this knight to reveal its intentions. If knight f7 and queen d5, black seems to be alright. Bishop e6 is threatening. Therefore, Kramnik has to invest another piece to keep the initiative going. And he goes for it, goes queen takes d3. Threatening checkmate, only move h takes g5. H takes g5, once again threatening checkmate. But White is now 2 pieces down for, I don't know how many pawns, like 5 or whatever. Doesn't really matter. The question is, can White keep his initiative going, or can Black stabilize the position? Buhmann plays the only good move. Bishop takes e6, freeing the f7 square for his king. If he played g6, stopping the mate, then White once again would break through with rook h6, and for example bishop e6, rook g6. Black will not survive this onslaught. So, bishop takes e6, queen h7 check, king to f7. Very energetic performance by Kramnik so far, and he has to keep throwing punches, which he does. He plays d5, because if black manages once again to get 1 or 2 tempi to activate, black can easily be much, much better here. So d5, using the fact that this rook is facing the queen, black can't really take here with either minor piece. After bishop d5, there's many strong moves, but f5 looks easiest, threatening all kinds of unpleasantness, and black is not going to survive this. Similar story about knight takes d5, f5 just breaks through. So black has to go bishop f5, attacking this queen and maintaining at least some control over all these light squares. And here is where Kramnik, after a very energetic game with great home preparation, great sacrifices, objectively goes astray, even though the move he plays is the most natural move in the world, and I'm sure most people would have gone for this. He plays e6 check, but the wise computer says that this was the time to retreat temporarily, go queen h5 check, bishop g6, and either queen f3 or queen e2. Queen e2 is a computer's choice. Queen f3 looks a bit more natural. When the white massive pawns and initiative more than compensates for the 2 missing pieces, objectively, it seems like white is better here. e6 and d6 are coming. It's going to be very, very hard to weather this storm. And that's what Kramnik should have done. But let's see why e6, king e8, queen takes g7, which he played, does not win. Because it looks winning. White does threaten rook h8, and he threatens d6, completely annihilating the black defensive line. So black has to do something now, and Buhmann found the only way to stay in the game. The move queen to c7 with a double attack. Doesn't look like it. It's threatening queen c2, checkmate. That much is clear. But it's also threatening knight takes d5. Attacking the black queen, the white queen on g7, and the knight covers his own queen from d5. And it turns out that white can't parry both of these threats, no matter what he does. Be it c3, rook d2, rook h2. There's always knight takes d5. And with the pride of his position being destroyed while being two pieces down, I'm sure this was a bit of a cold shower for Vladimir Kramnik. The computer says no reason to panic, go rook d2, knight takes d5, queen d4, and calmly continue playing two pieces down, bishop takes e6, rook e1. The computer evaluates this as equal, but to go for something like this over the board, two pieces down, you just lost your two central pawns. I'm not surprised that Kramnik could not talk himself into it and decided to look for a more drastic solution. And he came up with something very drastic indeed. You gotta cover against the mate, so you start with rook h2, and after knight takes d5, we will see why he chose the h2 rook and not the d2 rook or the d1 rook. Because he gave up his queen here. Queen takes f8, king takes f8, and rook takes d5. That's why you needed the other rook to cover the mate on c2. But now let's have a look at what's going on. White is a queen down. Here's a rook versus a queen and a knight. Rook and a couple pawns, which is, of course, a tremendous material advantage for black. However, the black king is exposed. White does have quite some dangerous pawns. His three remaining pieces are working together quite nicely. So the position, at least in practical play, is still a total mess. The computer gives black an advantage here, but it's by no means obvious because black's queenside is also still sleeping. And as we'll see in a minute, it's not so easy to get into the game. The most obvious move would be bishop takes e6, but that allows rook h8 check. And if black were to go king g7, bishop d4, the white pieces coordinate very, very nicely. And white would be winning, while king e7 drops the queen after rook h7. And bishop g8, rook f5. Once again, the white pieces are overwhelmingly strong. So you can't take the pawn. This bishop is under attack. Buhmann decided to play the move bishop h7, naturally enough, blocking the h-file, keeping this bishop safe. But once again, the wise computer says that bishop g6 was the way to go. Some differences compared to bishop h7. Of course, the h8 square is not under control, but it's more important that the bishop is not under attack on g6. So white would be in trouble here if he plays a neutral move, which we're gonna see in the game, b3. Looks insane, but you can do that. Now, since the bishop is not hanging on g6, black can activate his queen with queen c3, and objectively, black should come out on top here, even though with time trouble anything could have happened, of course. Buhmann instead plays bishop h7 with seconds on the clock. Can't blame him for that decision at all. But now it turns out, and kudos to Kramnik for understanding that black does not really have a logical follow-up. White can't do anything directly either, there's no direct threats. But Kramnik found the amazing move, in my opinion, b3. Just quietly improving his position a little bit, making a luft for the king, depriving black of the c4 square. And it turns out that it's by no means easy to make a move. You want to go knight c6, of course, but knight c6 runs into rook d7 when this bishop drops and the queen doesn't have any good square. It's not easy to get these pieces developed. And queen c3, which would have been strong with the bishop on g6, now allows white a couple options. Bishop d4, for example, is possible. And even oh no, not rook h7, bishop d4, let's say. Queen e1, king b2. And it's a big difference that this bishop is hanging in many lines. White would actually be better here. So very hard for black to make a move. Buhmann came up with king to e8, covering the d8 square, getting his king out of the danger zone, even though not really. And here Kramnik decided, I'm a queen down, I should probably do something active before black gets developed. And he goes for g6, which objectively I don't think changes the assessment of the position. It's a very decent move. But practically, I really like the computer suggestion to just do nothing for another move. Go king b2, control the c3 square, and ask black to make a move, because it's still by no means easy. Knight c6 still runs into rook d7, else very hard to come up with a sensible move. Computer gives some funny variations, like bishop to e4, c4, bishop takes d5, not forced, but just a cute line. Rook h8 check, king e7, rook h7 check, king d6, rook c7, king c7, c takes d5. White is still a rook down, but he does have 4 pawns, and the black pieces still struggle to get out of their jail on the queen side. Objectively, this should probably end peacefully after some more madness. But who knows what would have happened in a practical game here. So Kramnik, instead of king b2, decides to force the issue, plays g6, giving up this pawn to gain some tempi and to gain access to the h8 square. Bishop g6, rook h8, king e7, and f5. That was his idea. Defending against the mate on c2 and attacking the bishop while threatening mate himself with bishop to g5 check. Black only has one move to defend, which is the move bishop takes f5. Good news for Buhmann is that all his last moves are very much forced and easy to play even in time trouble, so practically this was a bit easier to handle for him than the quieter move king to b2. Bishop f5, rook takes f5. Now, white is still a lot of material down. He has a rook and 2 pawns versus a queen, but the black queen side is still not developed. However, Buhmann gets a breather for half a move and uses that for the very active nice move queen to c3, attacking the rook on h8 and the bishop on e3, also threatening some checks. White does not have time to play it slowly here. If he goes rook h3, let's say, king takes e6, his attack's just running out of steam. However, Kramnik does have a way out. He goes bishop g5 check, king takes e6, king d6 was no better, for example, rook ff8 or rook e8. Well, let's say rook e8. Covering this pawn, still making it hard for black to develop, and white has at least sufficient compensation. Black should probably look for perpetual with queen a1, queen d4. So king takes e6, logical. Now, both white rooks are hanging. Only move rook f6 check here. And Buhmann sensibly decides to give the queen back. There's no way to play for a win with the king move after king e5. White at the very least has a perpetual with stuff like rook e8, rook d8, but could probably even play for more. Like Mr. Comp gives a very quiet king b1 here and saying, you know what, you can't do anything. Therefore, Buhmann took the right decision, went queen takes f6, bishop takes f6, king takes f6, and the situation has stabilized. Black is still a piece up, white has 1 pawn for it. Black can't really develop his queen side now, but he has a plan of bringing his king to c7, then going rook a7 and slowly unraveling. However, Kramnik, of course, had anticipated this and had seen that he does have a way to immediately regain or gain another pawn with rook h6 check, king e5, rook takes b6. And now the situation all of a sudden is a pretty clear-cut draw. Black only has 1 remaining pawn, the a pawn, and that's not enough to play for a win here against a white rook and 3 pawns, because the best black could possibly hope for is rook versus rook and knight, and that is a pretty simple draw. And black probably doesn't even have enough resources to reach that, so the game, after some more logical moves, concluded peacefully. Here. The players repeated moves because black doesn't have enough resources to orchestrate an attack against c2, let's say, without losing the a6 pawn. So no point in continuing the battle. And what a battle it was. Draw between Vladimir Kramnik and Rainer Buhmann. Not many games where we see Kramnik sacrifice 2 pieces. First of all, this nice homework with bishop d3, threatening these bishop takes h7 things. And then first piece sacrifice after c4, g takes f5, c takes d3. And second piece sacrifice, knight g5, h6, queen takes d3, hg5. All of this was correct. White had a very dangerous initiative and was better objectively. Buhmann defended well, then Kramnik missed this one moment where he hurried with e6, queen g7, should have gone queen h5 check instead. And that forced him to invest even more material down the stretch. A queen sacrifice here, which maybe was not 100% correct objectively, but it was very, very interesting, led to big problems in practice. However, Buhmann also played a good game, managed to defend and managed to hold. The star move of the game, to me, none of these sacrifices, but after bishop h7, recognizing that he has time for this very quiet move, b3 by Vladimir Kramnik. He's going to be disappointed he didn't win, but credit to both players. Kramnik, very creative game. Buhmann, very, very good defense. Endured a lot of pressure and got away. So a fantastic game by both players in the third round of the Dortmund Sparkassen Cup. I hope you enjoyed it. There's still a lot of play to come. There's also the Buhmann starting, so we're not short of chess entertainment these days. Thank you guys for watching this video and see you soon. Bye bye.